I am live. I'm reading still A Lot to Remember. Lot is an area of France, and Joan Marshall Grant has written about this area because she did a lot of journeys there. It is dedicated to Denys and Charles, her husbands, at different times. With love, A Lot to Remember. I stopped at a chapter entitled Terror by Night, chapter 19, and it recounts a nightmare Charles had when she was traveling with him. And I continue here. This is a travel description, some of which she did to identify the area. A little further on we leave the car again and walk to the edge of the cliffs, which here make a loop that almost encloses a strip of cultivation nearly a mile wide. The fields below us are all sizes and shapes, and each is a patch of pure colour. Pasture really does look like emerald velvet. In spite of this being a cliché and fields of poppies look like sheets of scarlet silk, no sound except distant cowbells. Wonderful textures in the valley as the light changes and the reflection of poplar trees ripple in the silver metal river. Leave Charles happily brooding and wander off to collect flowers. Campanulas, 3 varieties, evening primrose, Jacob's ladder, and some whose name I don't remember, which are rather like foxgloves, but have yellow flowers and narrower leaves. Come to a herd of cattle, sorrel red, with enormous horns like the ones in Egyptian tomb paintings. Cattle in charge of a small boy who's standing on the edge of the cliff, waving his arms to stop them coming too close to it. Cattle ignore him and press forward to turn aside only at the last moment. Boy quite unruffled at what seems to have been a narrow escape from being pushed over. Should hate to have the job of herding them. Boy starts whistling and shouts "Allez" at the cattle, who obey by going to the pasture on the safe side of the road, wish he had not shouted "Allez," but realize this is silly of me. Collect Charles, who seems much more cheerful and is intent on the quality of the evening light in the valley instead of thinking about screams in the night. Realize that as the shadows of the poplars are so long, it must be getting late, so instead of stopping for a drink at Carjac, we take the main road on the right bank home. Charles mentioned the screaming again after we had gone to bed, but although I put a notebook handy in case either of us had a relevant dream, nothing happened and we both slept soundly. I spent the morning doing flowers for the dining room because we were giving a lunch party for Margaret and Julian Pitt Rivers, who were bringing over Paddy Fairmont from their lovely Chateau du Roc at Fons. Madame Rocher excelled herself and glowed at the compliments showered on her as she produced relays of delectable food. Asparagus, each stalk as thick as my thumb and green and succulent for all its length, followed the pâté de foie gras. There were sweetbreads with mushrooms and a subtle sauce before the admirable chickens. Then there was a perfection of salad, and by this time we were all so full that only greed drove us to tackle the strawberries. It was a gay party, and nothing was further from my mind than spooks, when, about 4:30, we rose from the table and decided that a stroll would be the best method of shaking down lunch. We were all feeling somnolent from overeating, but we wandered about admiring the view and listening to Julian and Paddy making intelligent comments about architecture. If I was feeling anything as we walked up to the church, it was a slight smugness that we had found Madame Rocher while Margaret and Julian, who lived within 40 miles of her. Abruptly, I found my focus of attention beginning to drift. And I knew I must be careful not to start talking with anyone they could not see, in case this caused them to think that they had lunched with a lunatic. I tried to tune out the other wavelength, but it was too insistent, so I left them, hoping to return before my absence was noticed. Within a couple of minutes I was climbing over a wall into an abandoned garden. The slope was steep and the turf very slippery, but though a facet of my mind was urging me to take care in case I slipped the disc again, it was as though someone was pushing me along with a hand in the small of my back. It was a benign directive, this I knew for certain, which was with me to make sure that I had kept my balance, that I did not stumble when I was along a narrow ledge which led to a stone bench for my body to sit on. Until later I did not notice that the bench was in fact only a block of stone, which must have been part of the outer wall before the castle was demolished, or that it was on a rocky outcrop within a yard of a sheer drop of over 300 feet. All I knew was that I need to go no further, because I had come to the place where I was needed. I could feel my heart thudding, and knew this was not due to the exertion of the climb, but was only a familiar symptom of being conscious on two levels simultaneously. To check that my critical faculty was working, I took my pulse fast, but not too fast, about 120. Being now ready, I leaned forward and covered my eyes with my hands so as to cut off sensory impressions and identify more clearly. Okay, so I stop this here and continue later because the battery is almost empty. Today is the 11th of November 2024.